My name is Kilkenny, the host of the Modern Mystic podcast. And today I am overjoyed to be speaking with artist, writer, and social activist Catherine Pennepacker. Catherine is a textile visual community artist living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She exhibits locally, nationally, and internationally, and has worked in private and public collections. She has done many projects with Mural Arts Philadelphia and other organizations over the years with folks of all ages and all backgrounds. Though still occasionally weaving pictorial tapestry, she tends to weave with unusual and shaggy materials on random frames and fences as her loom. For the last many years, she considers herself simply an artist and uplifter. She weaves, writes, paints large textile murals, and, as often as possible, determines ways to bring art, especially textiles, to the streets, to everyday people. She works with those who are with and without shelter, in active addiction or recovery, someone's someone and yours. No matter the circumstances of ability or disability, Catherine believes that art is a form of harm reduction and wellness support. Catherine, welcome to the Modern Mystic podcast.
Well, I am so overjoyed and humbled to be here with you. Thank you for the welcome.
Well, Catherine, it's really a re-welcoming because you were one of my first guests on this podcast so long ago. It was episode number 6, Art as Activism, Art as Practice. So folks listening, if you haven't heard this really, it's a very compelling episode and very inspiring episode. Definitely go back to the beginning, episode number 6, and check it out. But one of the real reasons I wanted to have you back, Catherine, is because truly you are one of the most inspiring people I have ever met. And
Whoa.
So I thought we could discuss today this topic that I'm so passionate about, and I think you are too, about how, as modern mystics and as conscious humans on this path, we can make our lives our masterpieces and how we can make our life art. So let's begin the conversation as I always like to open it up. What does it mean to you to be a modern mystic? It's kind of with that target in mind to shoot towards that
Gotcha.
direction at least.
Yeah. I just love. Thank you. I just love the question. I love the feeling of it too. It's like, why are we doing what we're doing? How to bring about the passion and the interest and the inspiration. So I've been reflecting some more on like this idea of like, what does it mean for me to be a modern mystic? What I've come to as I've been thinking about it is, I've taken this idea of from one of my teachers, the two wings of a bird, grace and hard work, right? Like sort of like the opposites of that. And I've been sort of adding 2 more wings to that bird. And so the thought is, for me, what it means to be a modern mystic is vulnerability and confidence. And so sort of walking that delicate path in life, whatever we're doing, with sort of a vulnerable openness, but also confidence and courage. So that's what I've been thinking about. Yeah.
That's really profound. And when I was contemplating this episode, at the end of my most recent contemplation, because I was several times, but I was thinking about different opposites, about making life artful, and about how to bring at times softness and how to bring hardness and that skillful application of that in life, or the different dichotomies, and that being an artist, and I'm not a fine artist, but you're a brilliant fine artist, and one of my sons is a brilliant fine artist, and I watch him at times be like, his process of applying something that's deeper and richer in color, and then he'll say, oh no mom, so no, it actually needs something more subtle, and how those, so the opposites can be so helpful, and knowing when to apply which one. And like you're talking about, that's such a beautiful complementary opposite contemplation about vulnerability and confidence, for
Mm,
sure. So
mm,
that's, and of course grace and
mm,
hard work. So
mm,
I love that so much.
mm.
When we consider and think about art and the conversation of art, I thought it'd be something interesting to discuss, because it's so subjective, of course, but what
Right.
is even art? And I'd love to hear your take on that. When I was contemplating, like, what is art to me? I was thinking, well, of course, there's the mindfulness and the discipline, and so much inspiration is required. I was also thinking about how when we have art that I love, art that I've seen you create that I love too, and other art forms I've seen that I love, they're pieces that wake people up, and
Mm.
that's something that is very mystical and part of, I think, this mindful path of, waking up. So talk to me, please, about your ideas of what art is. And then we can talk about ways to thread those ideas into our everyday life, because that's so much about what the podcast is about, right? How do we
Yeah.
live these concepts?
Right, right, right. And so, like, I think, like, what is art? I don't know. I think it's like paying attention, right? And like witnessing and noticing. So I feel like, because, like you said, it's so it's so subjective, right? But like, if we can like sort of open our lens of our eyes, our hands in terms of the technique or the craft, but our heart also to like sort of ask questions when we're looking at whatever the media is. So maybe it's sculpture, or maybe it's painting, or I do a lot of work with thread and yarn and this and that, or maybe it's words or music, or it's like, can we pause for a minute and just like step aside and witness and pay attention to hear the message of what the artist might be saying. So that's what I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot about, is just like sort of really uh, taking notice. Because what I've been thinking about lately is that we're all so bogged down with busyness and hecticness and like duty and ambition and distraction that we need to very conscientiously, and deliberately pause to notice the nuance, right? So that is, like like you were saying, like how to take it into the everyday sort of modern mysticness of it and the everyday practice of it, but also um, just like as a human being, right? It's like, aren't we all like overwhelmed with like the pressure, the go, the do, the this, the that, so it's like, sort of creating our time to be an art piece that we can connect to. And
Yeah.
other people's, can we be witness to the art of life in other people too, the stranger,
Mm.
you know
Yeah. And what do you mean by that exactly? Like, can you give an example, please? That's so good.
yeah, so it's like, I feel like I've been reflecting on this, because I feel like, the more complex our society gets, or our daily life gets, we're constantly like engaging, or uh, crossing paths with other people, neighbors, uh, demands of emails and text threads, and uh, that there's just like so much going on. So it's just like, can we pause ourselves enough to uh, take to get into the other person's shoes, to listen, to connect. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 Things I hear you saying, which are so important, right? Or one, just going back to what you said earlier, pausing and asking questions. And I think then it threads into what you just mentioned about like people so rushed. And obviously, in this current
Yeah.
modern, fast paced day of technology that's just getting quicker and quicker, the miles per hour are ramping up. So the inquiry and the pausing and all those practices have even more profundity and even more bang for
Mm,
the buck, so to speak, because the
mm,
rapidity is just so incredibly great. So I love when you said about like as an artist, just asking the questions. I had looked up the etymological word, definition of, and really roots is what that means,
mm-hmm,
of the word art and the
mm,
concept of art. And what I found when I did some research was that the word art, which surprised me, was consecrated only in the 13th century in Middle English. So like not so long ago, really,
right,
in
right.
that those are three letters, art. And originally it meant skill as a result of learning or practice. So
Huh.
I loved when you talked about that practice, in day to day life. And, nowadays the word art is commonly defined and used for anything which one considers of great aesthetic merit,
Hmm.
skill acquired by experience, study, or observation, the conscious use of skill and creative imagination, especially in the production of aesthetic objects, and a skillful plan, which I thought was
Hmm.
interesting. So there's so many ways to think about those definitions that are, formalized. But what do you
Right,
think
right.
about those? Do you have any comments?
Well, yeah, immediately what I was thinking about is that, there's a lot of juicy stuff in that. So thanks for sort of taking it apart, because I think there is this like really deliberate skill and, dedication that as artisans we put into learning the trades. Learning, I remember my weaving teacher said to me, "Kat, you gotta learn the rules and then you can break them, right? So, but you first want to like apply yourself as a student, as a learner, and then you can uh, you sort of branch off from there. So, like, there's this whole like um, uh, sort of teasing out the threads of the practice of showing up to the studio, the practice of spending the time getting the work out there, the practice of sort of pausing with the work, and seeing what it might be speaking to oneself as the artist. So what I'm getting at with that is just like, I think there's like energy and like, uh, there's like a whole spirit behind color, right? And composition. So like as artists, we have to um, tune into that and listen, because the the material, the medium will give us feedback if we're listening. Mm-hmm.
Oh, talk more about that. So I love that spirit as color. So, like
Well,
the
yeah.
spirit of red, talk to give the listeners like an example of that. Because I mean, of course, like in the yogic tradition and the tantric yoga and many different lineages of Eastern thought, there's thought about chakras and energy centers and vibration, and there's certain colors associated with those. But I want to hear your thoughts
I
as
love
a
that.
professional
Yeah,
fine artist.
yeah. So it's just like, I feel like, like I remember like as learning how to weave, my colleague and I who were weaving, we would play this color game. So like we worked with bobbins of yarn. We would like wind these bobbins of yarn, and we would always put like three different color, or two, and then the other one of us would put the third one, and we would sort of find such pleasure in like what would happen if we put red and pink and orange together, and sort of like the energy and the vibration of that, and what would happen if we put like a purplish red next to a blue and a violet, and so I think that there's this like this harmony and this dissonance too that can take place, and we see that in nature too, right? Like how our bodies feel when we're, you know uh, sort of galloping through a field of, I don't know, tulips in the spring, not to sound so like airy fairy here, but like, or like, the colors and the sort of the richness of the soil, like in autumn time, like when we're like around the colors of pumpkins and oranges, oranges and sunflowers and like all the different variations of tone. And so um, yeah, color has its language. Yeah. And
That's so beautiful.
certainly, if I could add this, I think material does too, right? I think,
Mm-hmm.
like I know it's like there's like this sort of crunchy hardness to like plastics and thread that's woven or made out of like plastics and synthetic, and then there can be like a sort of like a softness and a richness to working with, say, silk or wool or natural fibers. But I want to say here that I think it's important to note that it's like sometimes, or not sometimes, all the time, the artist, uh, we like make decisions about, well, what are the materials and what are the colors that we're choosing to use because of the message that we're trying to get across. So
Yeah.
is there like juxtaposition? Is there like tension that we're trying to pull out?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that this conversation so much in the way of thinking about how to make art and your life like art and
Whew.
your life a masterpiece because so often the little things are the big things. And
Mm.
so, I was thinking like when you were speaking about like color and the first thing you talked about was the yarns and kind of playing, it sounds like a little game with your colleague, like what would happen if we added that, who's going to add which third color
Right,
to
right.
this. And I mean that's so much about wonderment in life, like how we can practice the art of wonderment
Mm.
and practice as modern mystics this art of paying attention and paying attention in a way that creates excitement, that creates vitamin J, joy is what I call
I
it,
love that. Yes.
like, and that's what you were doing with that. And so I love this idea, even in life, to think about color. Like there are people listening who, many who aren't artists or aren't talented in that arena, but how we can make life our art by thinking about color in our life, and you had mentioned like seeing how even color makes us feel in our body, because actually living, I know this sounds radical to live in your
Mm.
body,
Mm.
but
Right.
right, it is radical because so much of our modern day society is pulling us out of our body.
Right. Yep.
So it's so interesting. So, what are ways that people who are not fine artists can play with like color in their life, do you think, and texture in their life, in their moment to moment life?
Oh,
Do you have
yeah.
ideas? Because you're so
Oh,
so
I
good at
I
this kind of thing.
do. I think it's so fun to like work with material that's so uncomfortable to us and body parts that are so unusual, uncomfortable to us. So like I guess what I mean by that is like I'm right-handed, so I make it a practice of uh, picking colors and drawing with my other hand, my left hand, and sort of it shifts up the brain, of course, but I think it gives us like the opportunity to sort of enmesh color and movement with the body movement, and so just for like everyday life kind of stuff, I think um, I don't know, like even the other weekend when I was out camping, I just like went around and like picked up stones, pebbles. I looked around to see, well, what's around me in nature here? Let me make some sort of like installation. I think that's something that like all of us can do. We can just like create these like little altars or gifts or like offerings to or thanks to nature just by like noticing the beauty in nature and the everydayness of things. So I mean I live in the city, so uh, sometimes it could be a stretch, like, okay, well, what do I want to sort of gather? Um, but I think no matter where we are, like even you know, sort of like an urban crazy thing that you can go to a dollar store and you can find, you know, uh, items that just maybe spend $3, right? And get like three very different items. Um, I don't know, like, let's say, like Q-tips and uh, a ball of ribbon and uh, nails, okay, in the hardware section of the dollar store. This sounds silly, but follow me for a second if you would, and just like, and take those those items out of the bag and create some sort of pattern with those very different items.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need to be inspired about creating pattern, that's a whole nother exercise that is fun to do as an artist, or even as or anyone can do. Like, look at the patterns around you, like with the hubcaps in the cars or the patterns on buildings. So we can pull inspiration from, very urban settings, the floors, the ceilings, the walls, the blinds on our windows. And of course, when we go into nature, we can find pattern like in leaves and uh, trees and, pine needles. And I mean, there's just pattern everywhere, and that's the beauty of it. So I don't know if I'm sort of dashing around too much here, but I just think that, like, we want to figure out ways to, like, wherever we are, whether it's like in the sort of the solace and the ease of nature, which is a beautiful thing, or if we're in the modern hecticness of an urban situation, can we find a way to sort of ground ourselves and locate things that will give us moments to pause and uh, create, even if it's in our imagination. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Because being even when we're with like younger kids, that's what
yeah.
is so often the invitation to do. And then, what you're talking about is like continuing that play and that potentiality for creativity, because
Mm,
the creativity, lives at least from the yogic tradition in the same spot as our feeling sense and
mm,
our even our sexuality. And there's so many potentialities from this place of
mm,
the womb. It's essentially the womb center. And I
right.
love what you're talking about, because it's like how can wherever I am, if you're in nature, like you're saying, you can. And I like that point about taking different items, because I hadn't
Mm,
thought of that point. Whenever I go out into nature, there are times where I'll do that, like make, it's called a little mandala in a lot of the
right,
Asian
right.
traditions, where you
Yeah,
can make a pattern,
yeah.
that replicates itself. And people who aren't familiar with that, look that up. It's so much fun with the leaves or the acorns or this and that. But what you're saying specifically about, like, oh, take different shapes and very contrasting things, which is a
Mm,
great idea. I actually made a beautiful big food mandala recently when I was teaching in California on this
okay.
massive kitchen counter. And
Oh,
we took
wow.
all types of different foods, and it was so uplifting. It was
Mm,
incredibly, incredibly
mm,
moving. So you can really
mm,
make a practice of this with so many different materials, like you're saying, and that
yeah.
inner child, will start to really heal and get enlivened. And we start to just automatically feel that wonderment, feel
Yeah.
that joy
Yeah.
when we allow ourselves to make these patterns and to explore different shapes and textures and such. And
Yeah.
then, another thought I had, just to piggyback off of your great thoughts, is like, okay, like maybe one week you say, okay, this is my red week. And I'm
Mm,
just going to focus on red this entire week. And you can do tons of research and you could think, okay, first chakra, red, grounding, centering, anchoring. Or you could not. You could just literally be like, red, let me get curious. Like you said, let me ask the question.
mm,
This is my red period, like Picasso had his blue period. This is my red
right.
period. This is my red
Right.
week. And I'm just going to see what happens if I surround myself with tons of red, eat
Mm,
cherries,
I love that.
eat
Yes.
tomatoes, and
Yes.
I just started, this is riffing off your thoughts.
Sure.
And then the next week, okay, well, you could go orange, of course, that's very rainbow linear, but whatever. You could do purple next week, just pick. And, that's an interesting practice, and maybe write about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
with your dominant or non-dominant hand if you're as adventuresome as you are. But
Right, right. But don't you love like making beautiful like food, platters, like you're saying, on the table, like even every night, like just how we arrange our food on the plate with color and texture and all. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's such an art thing. I mean, some people, don't like to cook at all. And
Mm,
I'm like, I feel like I'm in both factions where like people often are one or the other. And I have to cook for a lot of people all the time. And it's often in a rush way, being a
yeah.
parent. So there's like this relationship where at times it feels like a chore. But then
Mm,
I find even if I cut something really beautifully, like the other night I was making something and I cut some strawberries, and made them like 3 little hearts on every person's plate, and just
right.
that little tiny act, you're so right, can all of a sudden bring wonderment, bring the remembrance, because that's what
Mm,
all this is about, right? The remembrance that life is really a gift and we're really here in each moment to find that mystical and the mundane and the magic in the present moment.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really like those ideas. Really like these ideas. You're such a, from things you shared with me, queen and sovereign of
Mm,
ritual. And so, for me, for sure, that's one way that I feel like it's probably the main way I feel like I integrate what feels like artfulness into my
mm,
life. So I wanted
mm.
to ask you, what are some things, really practical things that you do or could offer in the way of strategies for folks listening to help really ritualize your life, which to me really helps make life sacred. It invites the sacredity in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. It's something that really helps to ground me. I mean, I feel like, as artists, sometimes we go through periods of like uh, being really explosive with our creativity and like doing and creating and all that. And then sometimes we go through like these times of like little roadblocks or stuck spots. So I find like by integrating ritual into my daily practice, no matter if I'm in that like really intensely creative time or that what I refer to as my gathering season, sort of like
Mm,
when I'm sort of like
love that.
pulling ideas together. One thing I always think about is something one of my teachers said to me was wind your bobbins, sharpen your pencils. Like always just like if you don't know what you're going to do or even if you do know what you're going to do, create like a little pocket of time to prepare yourself. So that's sort of like a practical thing when it comes to like with yarn and string and pencils and paints, clean your brushes or whatever. I mean, I do something when I walk into my studio every day. I touch my head and I touch my heart and I breathe, because I've just been so like in a space for the last bunch of years of like creating like synchronicity between the two. And
Mm,
so I do that. I walk into the door, which is right behind me here, come into my studio, and it's just like I touch my head and I touch my heart.
so
Um,
great.
yeah, and it's just like, and then I think I have a little bit of superstition, and I don't know if it's just like, we all have like little quirky things about us, whether it's like, being how we're being raised or just culture or whatever. But um, I get on my knees. I just even if I'm at my wall mural, because I paint my wall murals, so it's like
Mm-hmm.
when I'm like crouched down to like clean my brushes or get my paint set up, I take like an intentional moment to, um, like I said, connect with head, heart, and then breathe and just like, okay, uh, here we go, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
So when you're on your knees, are you thinking something reverent? Are you clearing out your mind? Like what is the
it,
intention with the or the feeling when you're on the knees? What are you
yeah,
receiving?
the feeling is let me be a vessel, let me be a channel, let me be sort of a conduit, let
Mm-hmm.
me listen, let me. let me be free, actually, because I feel like a lot of times, I think we all in life have like these like little voices in our head that are like, oh, you should be doing this, or you could be doing that, or what about this, or the pressure of that, or oh, they're better than this, or oh, you should be, and there's like all of that. So it's just like, I think that like little bit of a ritual grounding for me is just like, it's okay. I'm a conduit. I'm here. What can I do to express myself?
Mm-hmm.
What am I hearing? Because I find myself often saying to myself, Kat, just be free, be free, be free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
trust.
love that so much. Thank you for sharing that so authentically.
Mm,
That feeling of just like that yearning to be free, because
mm,
in the yoga tradition they call that svatantriya, and it's considered
mm.
like one of the main yearnings of life. So when I
Wow.
asked you that question, you really got to the root of that, and I think so many people feel that way. I think so many people are kind of in the entrapment of kind of discontentment and fill in the blank, anxiety, depression. But like the antidotes to all of those things, right, are what? Svatantriya, that freedom that as a
Mm,
human is so much part of what we crave.
yeah.
And I like
Yeah.
what you said. And when I say ritual, to clarify for the listeners, it's that repetition of things, because in the
Mm,
repetition, it reminds us of things. One of my kids
mm.
said to me recently, Mom, how come you always play this one song when we're done surfing? Because I love to surf.
Oh,
And to me,
yeah.
it's like the temple, the dojo, the church, the synagogue, the mosque. Like when I go surfing, it's like the great, like, amazing connective experience to me. And I
Hmm.
and I
Water.
was thinking about that. Yeah, so love water, um, and the excitement and the challenge, and there's just so much about so many things
Yeah.
that in the water. But for sure, I'm a tea bag, and you can just add water, and that's enough. And then there's all the things on top. But and when and I was thinking, well, it's ritual, because what it does is it reminds me, when I play
Mm,
this song, instantly it reminds me, oh my God, this is so precious. Because I only get to
mm.
surf a few, there's only a handful of days in the whole year you get to surf
Yeah.
where the waves are good and the temperature is right and all these things. And then there's only a handful of days within that I'm with my kids surfing.
Mm,
And so instead of taking the time to get to that appreciation and doing the mental gymnastics, which I often do. But it's like, well, I just put that song on and my whole body knows, oh my God, I'm here and I just surfed. And it's like, I don't have to go through any mental gymnastics.
yeah.
Music is the ritual. It just takes me. Just like
Mm,
you go to the knees and it just takes you to that, oh,
yeah.
right, freedom, let me be the vessel. Or
Right. Right.
I've started doing this thing in the morning recently where I do a bunch of things before I get out of bed in the morning. Like I
Mm,
have a few different practices and things I do, but I've added onto that layering the ritual of having one, and now actually I've just recently added two. So I'm weightlifting my thoughts that are thoughts that I want to be thinking. And it's not manifestation thoughts. It has to
mm,
do with like, oh, I am, I'll just say it. Like I am a spirit.
mm.
I am more spirit than anything else. It's that idea
Oh,
at least.
right.
And
Right.
just to remind myself, of
Yeah.
that macro kind of centering and that check. And
Yes.
just by having, like, I wake up and right away I think, oh, right, I'm more spirit having a human experience. Just
Mm.
by that ritual of just like, oh, I place this thought in my mind, it shifts the whole quality of my morning, that remembrance.
I so get that. I so get that. I feel like those little nuggets of messaging that we speak to ourselves support us. You know, I know sometimes I'll just say to myself, things work out for me. Things are always working out for me. Things are always working out for me. Or like the other day, I was like in this space of like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So it's just um, like these ways to sort of soothe and ground ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So people listening, like if you really often I'll do one per moon cycle, for the whole moon
Mm,
cycle, but people can do it in any way they want, one per month or one per year.
mm,
But I think that often the year long ones, people get lost because it's like the New Year's resolution,
okay, yeah.
in the long term. So I think like breaking them up in short, like if anything, like I think 13 and a half week cycles of things are really
Mm,
powerful. I've been doing
mm,
that more lately. And then you have 4 of them over the year, so it's very seasonal. Obviously,
Sure,
it's
I
in
like that.
conjunction with the season, but I think that can be helpful. But whatever works for whoever listening, the point is what you're saying is that consciously choose a thought that you're going to repeat.
Mm,
Put it in your
mm,
phone reminder.
yeah,
Put it, a thought that's aligned with you, because the truth is our thoughts can be like weeds, and all these sprouts can take over, right? And what you're saying is like, oh no, I'm going to weed out other thoughts by planting the ones that I know that to be true to me and my authentic self and vision,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
make me feel differently.
Yeah,
So
I think we probably can all relate to this. The other morning I woke up and I was like, I was so aware of how I literally, my mind was like, what was I so worried about last night? It's like I was searching for it again or something, and
you're
it's like the brain like sort of like is looking for that like groove to like sink back into. And I was like, Kat, what are you doing? And so just like sort of being gentle and careful with ourselves and aware of that, of just uh, like what you're saying, Kilkenny. It's just like it's a practice of uh, witnessing and watching our thoughts and then how we talk to ourselves.
yeah, and even that definition of art, I'm just recollecting, like one of them was a skillful plan. So
Right.
it's like to make art life, like you do have to plan, like you plan
Yeah.
your thoughts, like plan lots of things, but do that
Yeah.
internal
Yeah.
hygiene as well as the external hygiene.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to really get into with you, because it's really extraordinary, your work at this world and how you are just so committed to your offering art to folks struggling with drug addiction, the way that you offer art as harm reduction, and you work in one of the most literally abandoned sections in a huge American city.
Mm.
And can you speak a little bit about like the heartache you see, because that's one of the things I really love about you and your work and you as a human being, where I think a lot of people on the spiritual path and who are leaders like yourself, you can get into this really important, you know, prune your thoughts, quote unquote, stay positive, but we don't want to airbrush and we don't want to,
Right.
avoid the shadow. Then there's like a lot of other people in the psycho spiritual realms who are just like shadow, intensity, shadow, right, dark,
Right.
right.
Right. Right. Right.
And so to me, it's that Harascamos, and I'm really interested in having conversations where how do we integrate the full spectrum of humanity and do that? And that's a really
Mm.
hard thing to do. And it's something that I feel like you do really, really well. So could you please speak about how you do that? Because you are just completely no joke in the way of the despair that you see on a day-to-day basis, horror that you see on a day-to-day basis that most people don't partake in, frankly.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, can you please speak about that and how you think about it, and how you serve and how you think of it spiritually,
Yeah.
and how you function, frankly.
Yeah. Well, and I think it ties a little bit into ritual, like we were talking about, and sort of the practice. Um, I'm coming from like a really intense morning. So I'm just sort of like replaying some of the moments I had sort of leading up to the day, and the practice of getting back and sort of reintegrating back into what I see as like a really safe, welcoming, loving, supportive, cozy zone. Best I can to always have that delineation of self and other. We want to be so integrated and present with people, right? That are in whatever their walk of life is, but it's hard to do. It's not something I'm always able to do, but like um, you sort of you connect with people, and then you can't do it all, so you step away. So back to like what we were talking about with like sort of my ritual, what I do in the morning. I take public transportation around, to get from point A to point B. And I literally use those little pockets. I know, like on your podcast, I've heard you talk about like little pockets of peace, and it's something that I've sort of worked into my like daily life with getting from, my point A to point B and working with folks that are really in the depths of despair, and whether it's homelessness or addiction or I mean, I feel like there's so many just a lot of despair. I mean, we can call it this or that, addiction, this and that, but the bottom line is it's despair and overwhelm and all that. So it's just like, how can we connect with people as if you could be my neighbor or my sister or my brother or my in-law or whatever. Just like to see the humanity and connect with people as people. So
And that, excuse me for interrupting, but you
sure,
really
please.
practice that. Like when in your bio you said like someone. So when
Yeah.
you're with people who are homeless and who are um, struggling with drug addiction and such, in your mind's eye, like you're thinking of this actively?
I
Is that
am.
is that part of your practice?
I am. I think it's just like it's the kind of thing where it's the practice of like being as absolutely present as you can be, and I think it ties a little bit into. I keep swiping my mic. Excuse me. It ties in a little bit to what I was talking about before, which is like vulnerability, and I
Mm-hmm.
think even like even today, like I saw someone that I hadn't seen in probably 6 months or so, and she's been struggling with addiction and this and that. And I saw her when I was waiting for the bus. So we reconnected. She's really in a much better space now than she was before. I couldn't remember her name, and the vulnerability of this sort of this example right now is that the way that I was really able to connect with her and she with me was to say, I'm so sorry, I recognize your face, but I can't remember your name. And she was like, oh, I'm so glad you said something because I forgot your name too. But like, I remember our conversation about such. So it's like, it's really just like taking that time just to like look at someone and be completely present with somebody. Um, Sometimes it's in the practice of the work that I do, it's literally like shaking someone's hand and asking their name and uh, uh, and even sort of being silly, like, I'm so sorry, I might not remember your name, but like, and like, I'm thinking this moment today, someone said, uh, oh, Catherine, I'm going to call you Kathy. And I looked at her and I was like, you can call me anything, but don't call me Kathy. You know what I mean? And we were like laughing and joking about that. I'm like, you can call me Kat, you can call me Kate, you can call me this. But anyway, it was just like finding ways to like lighten up and uh, just be with the moment with the person, and really deeply listening best we can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful teaching. Just for those people listening who aren't doing such like intense kind of interacting on a committed daily basis, but I mean applying that to everyday life when you're walking around, because
Mm,
inevitably most of us are walking around, and if you're really paying attention, you're seeing different people, even if it's a
mm,
little bit, and people
yeah.
that are different from you,
Yeah.
and that like you're saying, obviously you keep yourself safe, but at the same time there's a vulnerability and a softening
Yeah.
that when it's safe to do so
Yeah.
connects
Yeah.
us back to our humanity and creates connection with others. And
Yeah.
part of that is, like you're saying, remembering
Right.
someone is everyone is someone, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like to always bring it down to the real practical. I feel like, and you said this earlier too, Kilkenny. It's like sometimes it's just a matter of asking questions.
Yeah.
So it's like I created this project a couple of years ago called the Listening Loom, where I bring the loom to the streets, and with two stools, and I just sit there and weave and invite someone to sit at a stool and just have a conversation. And often it's just like the two questions are how you doing and what do you need, and so
Mm,
just by asking that kind of question of how are you doing, and then truly listening, And if you're distracted or if you're interrupted or whatever, just really being vulnerable and being uh, uh, present to say, I'm sorry, I was distracted. Tell me again, like, or what do you mean when you say that, and
Mm-hmm.
just, or, what, I don't know the answer um, to that, but I think I know someone who might know, or like with a lot of the folks that I work with, they might have pretty intense wounds on their body. So it's just a matter of, it's like paying attention, like really looking at someone and, um, uh, it, I, I don't know, I hear myself I know I hate it when someone might say to me, "Oh, you look tired, Kat," or whatever, right? As like, as human beings, as women, like in a body, like often we're like, the last thing we want to hear is like, "Oh, you look tired," or "You look run down," or whatever, right? So I hear myself saying that, but like, um, I think we take, I'm sort of having a couple conversations in my mind, but I think we take clues from people when we're really uh, noticing and paying attention. So, it could be shaking someone's hand and noticing that they have, a wound on their arm or their leg, and so it's not something that I might be able to take care of, but I'll make a recommendation that they, go see somebody at wound care, uh, nearby, or I'll ask them, do, do you need some socks, or do you need water, or do you carry Narcan? Ask some questions about safety,
Mm-hmm.
simple questions about safety and harm reduction,
Yeah. Oh, really, really profound. And what if we all said to each other, like, what if we said, again, with people who we know we're safe with,
Mm-hmm.
or our intuition tells us we're
Mm-hmm.
safe with, but what if we, as a culture, went around and said to people, "How are you?" And actually people listened, and then people actually told you how they really are. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
Like, how often is it just that, "Oh, how are you? I'm good. I'm fine." Like
right,
how
right,
often does anyone actually tell you how they are? One,
right.
what would this world be? And even more radical, I think, what if we all went around saying, "What do you need?" Like,
Yeah.
like my body just went like, "Oh my god!" Like, if anyone asked me like what I need, like, when is the last
Mm.
time someone right? Like, meaning like in that way that they're fully taking you in, even
Mm.
if they can't give you what you need. It's such a gift of a question, because the brilliance of that question is the opportunity for the person then to reflect back to themselves.
Mm.
Oh, what do I need in this moment? Right?
Mm.
Like, because just to come full circle back to early in the conversation, which everyone listening knows, right? We're living this rat race pace in this
Yeah.
very accelerated society, that our needs are just not even necessarily paramount. The needs of our
Mm.
body, if we're hungry, if we're tired, half the time we run around, people don't even know, right?
Right, right. Yep.
And so to be the modern mystic is to be like fully in one's body, paying attention to, body, soul, and mind and spirit, and all the parts of self. So I
Yeah.
love that radical question and the idea that you asked that, like, what do you need?
Yeah, it's a question that is kind of a big question,
Big
because I
question.
feel like a couple of years ago when I got into this work, that question really terrified me, because it meant to me at the time of like, I can't take care of everyone's need, and how dare I ask that question if I
Mm-hmm.
know I can't help.
Mm-hmm.
So what I so there's a little bit of that, back to the vulnerability part again, right? Of like, I might not know the answer, but maybe by asking the question and by taking on um, the willingness to bring inquiry,
Yes.
uh, we can help make connections. And I think it's in the making connections, which is what would make society a better place, if we were able to connect the services and the organizations, and again the services, to one another, to see um, I'm gonna sort of shift the conversation a little bit from harm reduction to wellness support. So shifting, linking the services to not just to help people survive, but thrive. So if we're
Yes.
linking services and asking questions of, how are you doing? What do you need? Then we're able to sort of, be curious and ask questions and make connections with other people and, you know, uh, uh, develop ways of helping and supporting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the question for all of society because
Mm,
whichever stratosphere of life, whichever sector of life you're looking at, it's irrefutable that the numbers of depression, anxiety, suicide, all those things are at an all-time high.
yeah. Yeah, they
So
are.
just what you're saying, whichever demographic, we all need this. We all
Mm-hmm.
need more connection and more conversation about connecting and resources and all the things. But I do have a really profound
Mm,
reaction to your brilliant question of asking people, what do you need? And I honor and I
mm,
get and how thoughtful of you and
mm,
sensitive to be like, oh, but I can't really answer that. It reminds me of, as you know, a college professor. I teach one class
yeah.
at
Yeah.
a college that I love so much. And the first semester that I was teaching, I was like pulling so many hours. Like it's disproportionate,
Yeah.
ridiculous, unsustainable amount of time
Mm,
into my
mm,
paper marking and my responses and my comments to the students, and total semester one, like typical college professor faux pas. I'm sure anyone else listening probably did the same exact thing.
right.
So my best friend says to me, like, it's just not sustainable. Like you can't, like, and I was
Yeah.
like thinking to myself, yeah, I'm just gonna have to quit. Like I can't teach, I can't,
Right.
because I can't do it halfway. I love these students. They're telling me these really personal things about their life. And she happens to be getting her master's right now. And she said to me, which was such a beautiful reflection, but
Mm,
Kenny, I have so many classes right now where my college professors online do not even say anything. They don't say one word.
mm,
And yet it is still valuable, the exercise and the questions. It's just what
yeah.
you're saying,
Yeah.
right? The question, even if you can't solve it all, just to ask the question
Yeah. Yep.
helps the person receiving that. So it just, I had to bring that up because now I'm the kind of person, I still have to comment and say things, but at the same
Oh, yeah.
time I do much less because I remember, okay, they're getting value just from having the exercise of asking the question too.
It's like
So
we're big mirrors for ourselves, but for one another.
yeah, and
Yeah.
those spiritual
And
questions, right? Like all the different great spiritualities, great practices, great
mm,
religions, great, fill in the blank of the psycho-spiritual life
mm,
and lifelines all start with questions. Who am I? Why am I here?
mm,
What's the purpose of all this, right? All
yeah.
these different traditions were birthed from these texts where these questions were written
Yeah.
down. And so
Yeah.
asking ourselves the question. So listeners, now ask yourself, what do you need? Like, what do you need in this moment? What would your
Yeah.
answer be? What a profound thing to write down and just
Yeah.
contemplate
Right.
right
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And
And
even if you can't meet the need, like you could meet perhaps a step towards that need,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
you know?
mm-hmm. And circling around to something that you said earlier too, in terms of like ritual and taking care of myself in this work.
Yeah.
It was a real practical thing is the first thing I do when I get home after a really intense day is just take a shower. There's something so
Yes.
soothing about warm water. We were talking with your surfing and water. There's like this, the energetics of water, um, the sort of the vulnerability of being naked in water. So soothing, just having the warmth. But I find it's a really good sort of delineation from what I take on during the morning and the afternoon, the day, the people, the conversations, the intensity, the overwhelm, the upset, the fear, the
Hmm.
all that stuff that you sort of you can't help but hear and feel, right? Um, but needing to just to like shake it out and shift gears. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's profound because water rinses off, obviously, we know physically, dirt and such, but it definitely cleanses. And the shamanic tradition, many different traditions, like it literally also washes off others people's energies,
Yeah.
for sure. And I know this one hack that I know, even doing psychic work, if you
Hmm.
can't get into a shower, there's many different hacks, but one is you can picture a silver shower. Just picture a silver, specifically silver, because that's like neutralizing.
Mm,
So just picture yourself under a silver shower. And that can be really, really helpful if you can't run and get yourself a shower right away. But
yeah.
that's a really,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
beautiful way you're working with element water. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
what about just what you and I are kind of doing with each other, Olympic listening? Like I was
mm,
thinking when I was contemplating how to make art life, and you've got your listening loom,
yeah.
right? It's that just highlighting that, like the practice of listening. It sounds so simplistic. It almost sounds like, oh, whatever, right? But try, charge yourself. I'm going to listen Olympically for one day. It is
Mm.
no joke. It is hard work, and it will change your whole experience of life. Don't you think?
I think so. In fact, the other month I'm sort of chuckling at myself because I came up with this like the lasso listening mindfulness technique. It sounds so silly, but like it's the whole idea. I was sitting on this like little area where I've got some plants, and I literally just like was listening. I was sitting there by myself listening, and I was like noticing the birds over here, right? The different bird over here and the different sound over here and the lawnmowers over there. So I literally was like, by my listening practice, I was
Mm-hmm.
like this like cow gal lassoing the sounds and like just like noting them and taking note of them and taking note of the distinctions of all the different pitches and tones and all that. And that was for me quite a mindful practice of listening, like you're saying. Yeah.
It's a great practice. I
So it's
love
like
that so
listening
much.
to one another, as we were speaking
Mm-hmm.
of before, but just like listening to calm ourselves and to refocus or ground ourselves.
Yeah, and when we do that, we realize, I mean, that's the empowerment. We realize we have the power to be the artist of our life because
Mm.
we're paying attention to the colors or the quote unquote sounds in this example
Right,
of the
right.
birds or the lawnmower. I love that so much, and this and that, right? So this is the palette I have to work with. Okay, now I have the sovereignty and jurisdiction. Which ones am I going to actually turn my attention towards? Because what I turn my attention towards becomes my life's experience.
Mm,
Do I move
mm.
towards the sound of the lawnmower? Do I move towards the bird? Or do I hold space for it all?
Yeah,
Right? Or
witnessing
whatever
it.
it is. But the point
Right.
is, it gives us powerful sovereignty,
Mm.
which is part of becoming the artist, not just you're a part of the artwork, but you're the artist.
Right, right.
And you could do that with all the senses. It's even like you were talking about earlier. I loved when you were saying like about circles and shapes and paying attention to patterns and that whole labeling idea, and like square, circle. When you're looking around a room, or when you're waiting at the bus stop, or when you're
Yep.
waiting at your doctor's appointment. How you can just label circle, square, or maybe you make one whole week. Okay, this isn't red week because I don't care about color so much, but I like shapes, so this is circle
Mm.
week. And
Right.
you just pay attention to all the circles that come into your life, right? And what
Yeah.
that feels like, and invite more circles in, more blueberries, more basketballs, play basketball. Like
Right. Right.
how much of a I have never done that. I've never like made it circle week, so I'm going to try that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. Yeah. There's so many like parts of our, I love this conversation because there's so many parts, things that we've been talking about that like I'm like pulling back to. It's like one of the things that I do is I fix murals. So some of my murals that I did about 20 years ago, paintings still look like textiles, are in a state of disrepair. So I'm going back and I'm restoring them right now. So one thing that we were talking about is sort of like integrating what was to what is, to like make it feel symbiotic. So that's one part of the conversation that we were having. And then the other part was when I was saying about like be free, be free, be free. I find myself often, Kilkenny, like when I'm working on one of my projects where I'm trying to figure out how to like simulate two very different things. Like like you got to do the practical thing of like sort of uh, chipping away the chip paint, right? And then putting the sealant on to protect the metal, the primer, that's the word I was looking for. And then like integrating the color back into the original piece. So it's like what I've been loving about this project and what we're talking about now too, it's like all the nuances of the shades of blue, all the nuances of different colors, and how I'll um, find freedom in just like making sure that like if I've got like as an artist like different shades of blue in one area, that I'm going to like integrate a little bit of that tone, that color into another part of the carpet, so it feels like it lives together again. Now there's this wonderful term in Turkish carpets. As a weaver, I love this kind of stuff with rugs and this and that, and the term is airbrush, and that is that like that irregularity in color. Excuse me, irregularity in what would be noted as, say, the same color. So, like you've got like the blue indigo from plants, right? So the weavers would make different dye bats of bats. I said dye vats of blue, but as they would weave and dye their yarns and all that, they would have very subtle differences in the shades of blue, so that when it would then be spun into the yarn and woven into these carpets, there would be these extraordinary subtleties of blues and a little bit of aqua blue and a little bit of sky blue. So it's just like, and I'm bringing this up because I just find like whether it's in the restoration projects or in the weaving projects or in life, it's like how do we take ourselves that has had these like little sort of dings of ego bus or dings of um, um, confidence suckers or dings of sadness or despair, and how do we like sort of reorient ourselves or remember ourselves or pull ourselves back together to be like back to that word all brush, like this beautiful uh, uh, piece
Back to
integrated
what? You broke up a little bit. Would you mind saying a little bit?
integrated a person, a weaving. I was using the term a rug, with the colors and the nuances. Yeah.
I love that. Well, the
Mm,
lineage of yoga that I practice called Tantra literally
mm,
means to weave. Tantra. It's
mm,
a looming device and then to weave into. And so I just love the metaphor of weaving so much. And like you're talking about, like integrating it all, all the parts of self and integrating those parts of ourselves that, either we push away or we've been taught to push away, we've whatever subverted, and then of course the big T and little T traumas
right.
and
Yeah.
those experiences. And it's such an interesting thing I've been thinking about too as a parent lately, the notion of like how we don't want to make everything seamless for our kids, and how
Mm,
that, when you and I were talking about earlier on. So it's another thing fretting back to, right? In the beginning, the yin and the yang, the kind of differences. I can't remember which one you said. I remember I was saying softness, hardness. I think you were saying grace and hard work, the
oh
two
yeah,
wings
grace
of
and
the
hard work.
bird, right?
Yeah,
And then you
yeah.
were saying authenticity,
Vulnerability and yeah,
or excuse me, vulnerability and confidence.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. And right. So it's like the integration of all those polarities, and even with the kids, and then even with ourselves, that
Mm,
spiritual practice. Because if we're really, spiritual maturation and spiritual adulting, we
mm,
realize, like with the people we're custodian for, the pets, the kids, like with ourselves,
Yeah.
that we can and shouldn't really avoid all the hard things and the discomfort, and that it's more the question you're asking of how do we weave it in, how do we
Yeah.
figure out how to integrate it all in, all
Right.
of it.
And back to what you said in the very beginning, I think was about like the opposites in life, and the weaving that comes into it, the over, under, back and forth, behind and front. The very practice of weaving itself is just all about that polarity and duality that we're trying to integrate to make a whole tapestry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's so profound, so profound. I was thinking about, before we start to wrap up, just thinking, okay, what are other things to me that make life artful? And
Mm,
when I was thinking about that definition of art, which talked about, of course, imagination, but daydreaming to me is so important. These moments, whether we consciously give ourselves them. Some people do this very naturally. I have friends who like
mm,
daydream very easily. Some
yeah.
of us have to make it a practice where we
Yeah.
allow ourselves not to be productive. We allow ourselves this space to daydream because it's very profound,
Mm,
um, as a practice. So I was wondering for you as an artist, what you think about that. Like for me, like I'm very physical. I've got the Aries moon, so I have to, you know, often I combine it with something physical. So like I let myself like wander around the city for a period of time,
yeah.
and then I daydream while I'm doing that, and that's like very uplifting for me, and it also
Uh-huh.
gives me big downloads. Like I'll get big downloads of creativity and all sorts of things, seemingly doing nothing, but it's actually something. So what do you think
Yeah.
about that, and what do you do?
I feel like I'm a space cadet. I feel like I'm a daydream believer kind of thing that no, it's true. I feel like often, my wife is often saying to me like, uh, can you find words for that? Because I feel like I live in my head a lot and I'm often like, sort of like, I'm thinking of this and I'm thinking of that. And I'm just like trying to like pull it all together. Um, Lately I've been, back to this thing of listening, of just like, some things like really resonate in my gut, in my heart, in my gut, and I'm like, the aha moments that you were talking about. Um, so so I think I think I just it for me I I'm all over the place more times than not. So the anchoring and the practice just to listen is critical. So
Okay,
for
so
me,
for
yeah.
you, less of the practice of daydreaming because you're rocking that, you're mastering that. It sounds like, which is why you're a fine artist, right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. It's just like, you know, yeah. I want to like land on the ground more sometimes and just like uh, uh, celebrate um, the nuts and bolts of um, yeah, practicality stuff, because I feel like I'd like to be painting and weaving and just like dashing around all the time. So it's a real practice for me just to um, be grounded in my space head of creativity and imagination. Yeah.
Yeah.
I write. I don't know. I think
Yeah, I was
that's a
just going to
really
ask you, what's a practice, yeah, that helps you
yeah.
ground?
I write. I do a lot of writing, and I just like
So can you share some like like a real practical like exercise with boundaries and something that people could take away maybe that they haven't heard of or that you
sure.
like to do?
Yeah. So I just like I don't know. I like to give myself like at least 10 minutes a day and just write. Oh, and whatever, it's easy, right quick. When I start this, I'm like often like pausing my pen and just like getting back up in my head again, so it's just like, writing. And I've been doing something that I call what do I call it? It's sort of like run on sentence revolving door. So I literally like have a notebook where I don't pull the pen up. I just like write, and it's often the things that frustrate me or overwhelm me or aggravate me. It's just like so this is the practice that I'm doing and that I recommend to our listeners is just like take a pad of paper and whatever is ailing you or annoying you or aggravating you, just like grab a pen and don't lift that pen up. Just pull out the old cursive writing and just write it over and again. Write it, and then get another color because I do usually two colors. So
Okay.
actually, rather than a pen, I use markers. So I'll do, and each time I do it, I pick two different colors. So that's the fun part with the game that I do is I pick two colors as opposed to three, and I'll write whatever and I'll just like fill up the page, repeating that again and again, and then do it again with a second color. Um,
Now, when you say do it again with a second color, what are you doing? Are you writing more? Are you going over something?
I'm sort of going over, but it's like maybe like an eighth of an inch down from it, so it's slightly blurry. Like for someone to read it would be a testament and skill to like read my sloppy handwriting, but it's a way of me just to like exercise it. I have not, and I think it might be a good idea to like burn it up or like to create it into a ritual of like where to put the frustration. Right now, I'm using this practice as a way. I just want to be completely authentic here of like bitching and moaning, because I feel like that there's got to be a place for that, as modern mystics of like to just like be like boots on the ground. I'm frustrated with whatever's broken and missing in the system, what's greedy in the system, what's not working, and just like get it out, get it out, get it out.
Yeah, that's
So
a good practice
I've,
to get out
I,
of your body.
yeah. Um, so yeah, it's really important to get out because the body takes things on. So like, the shower and all that, like I was speaking of, but this writing practice too has been really helpful.
Nice, nice. Thank you for sharing that. I like the
Mm,
idea of the second color on top and doing it.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really, really, really good. Good. Well, Catherine, would you mind punctuating our conversation with whatever you
Sure.
feel moved, a benediction, a
Mm,
poem, uh, whatever you feel called to offer?
sure. 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 I like to, I'd like to first like, uh, take your fingers and touch the bottom of your feet and wherever you tread, wherever you walk the
If it's
rest of the
safe to do
day.
so, or you can
If it's
pause
safe.
and come
Thank you.
back.
Yes, yes, thank you. Yeah. And then bring your hands up through your body to your heart and then up to your head. And now what I'd like you to do is just like bring your one hand to your wrist and just hold your wrist real softly and gently to your wrist. And I want you to imagine that I'm tying a piece of yarn onto your wrist right now. And I'm going to speak this affirmation as I tie this. Imagine a purple string. So the affirmation is when you find sorrow in your heart, may faith, hope, and love comfort you. And when you're afraid and you're overwhelmed, may you find courage and support. Let this purple string that I'm tying on your wrist right now remind you of the precious dear one that you are. Your life is a blessing with your resolve for peace. Amen.
Mm, thank you. That was the sweetest of benedictions. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And everybody can feel that that imaginary string
Yeah.
when they go right before they go to sleep tonight. Maybe they can remember
Mm.
that blessing of peace. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine is so generously offering anyone who becomes a monthly Mystic member by December 1st, 2023, a heart yarn shag on a fence. So again, I have a Mystic monthly membership. It's got a beautiful assortment of alignment-based yoga videos, meditation videos, mystic hacks, learning to work with energy. There's a little astrology, tarot on there. So many, beautiful offerings in one elegant membership. And she's offering this beautiful, generous offering. Can you describe to people what this is?
Sure, thanks. So what I do is I go around the city and I find a chain link fence in often neglected or abandoned lots. Um, and I literally tie knots, many knots, and make a shag carpet kind of shag heart onto the fence. So I go in the morning and I make a piece of art shag on the fence and I leave it there for the community. So I've done a whole bunch throughout the city, and I am just offering my members that anyone wants to sort of be a part of this. I'm going to keep going and do different heart shags in this throughout the city, and I'd be so delighted to have your membership to Modern Mystic sort of kickstart me to keep doing more of these all throughout the city.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
yeah,
much, and
yeah.
they're so uplifting. If you want to go see pictures and follow Catherine too, of course. Catherine, where can folks find out more about your work and these shags and your most uplifting and powerful offerings that you do in this world?
Right. So, like on social media, if you go onto Facebook, I have this page called Adopt a Fence Sponsor a Shag. So, what I'll be doing for any members that want to become a member, and then I'll do a shag flag. I'll post it on the Facebook page of Adopt a Fence Sponsor Shag, and I'll put a credit to you and all that. It's kind of a way of like connecting with community. So, thanks in advance for being a part of bringing art and color and a heart to communities. You can also find me at kpanapacker.com. I'm on social media, and yeah, yeah, it's really,
Amazing. And that's
yeah,
KPANNEPACKER, correct?
correct. Yeah, thanks.
Yay,
Yeah, yeah.
wonderful. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for being here and for really offering a lot of
Mm,
practical and uplifting words, advice, hacks on how to make life more artful. Very inspiring as always. And I'm so grateful to have you now here twice. So big
thank you.
big gratitude. Thank
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome back. I appreciate it. And it's inspiring. I learned so much from you and this podcast. And thank you. Yeah, thank you.
you. Namaste.
Namaste.